Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East podcast. I'm Bela and Mike.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
So, Mike, what's new at your world?
Well, fall is here. We're recording this at the end of September, Bela. I think in a previous episode, we talked about the German elections, and those were yesterday. But even though we know pretty much the tally of the votes, we won't know what the government looks like, maybe for months. Now there'll be this kind of coalition building going on. So that's kind of interesting. And at our university, we're about to start our semester, and we're kind of trying this hybrid. Half of the classes are online and half are in the building with people spread out. So I'll teach some days I'll teach in the building, and then some days I'll teach online. So we'll see how that goes. But it's been interesting. Not all the students from overseas can get here, can get visas. So that's been a big challenge. So those would be the things I think that I'm seeing from my seat over here in Germany. What about you?
Yeah. Hey, a couple quick questions, Mike. So deciding whether a course is online or in the classroom, what are the factors that go into making that decision?
So it's pretty random. So I'd like to say that we took a bunch of factors into consideration, including the course content and the skills of the professor and the needs of the students. But since the corona rules are changing here in Germany, usually month by month, we didn't have the capacity to put that kind of decision-making analysis into play. So it's basically the day of the week that your class is on. So if you teach on Monday or Wednesday, you'll be online, and if you teach Tuesday and Thursday, you'll be in the building for the big bachelor's program, and then they switch it for the other bachelor's program and the master's program. So essentially, it's just trying to manage the room capacities.
Yeah,
because the small rooms are pretty useless. That we have for 15 students now can only hold 7, right? So and all of our classes have at least 12. So all of our small rooms are useless right now, which is interesting.
Oh, I see. So part of it could be a capacity issue and classroom size issue driving that.
That's all of it. And you can't mix the days, because if a student comes to school and they have first they have an in-person class, and then right after that they have an online class, we don't have enough space in the building, or probably even internet bandwidth, for them to sit down and find a space for them to sit quietly and join an online class. So I will be doing one hybrid. I had to get special permission because I'm going to teach it with engineering students, and they don't have the same grid. So it'll be, I'll have a room, and students are welcome to join us at the end of the day on Wednesdays, which is supposedly an online day. They're welcome to come to the building and join. They have permission to enter the building, to be there, and but they can also join via Microsoft Teams electronically. And I'll have a student, one of my grad students, to help me if there's questions or whatever, because it's hard to teach both in person and watch 20 students online and make sure that they're engaged. So I have a co-teacher who will help me with that.
Yeah, interesting. Now, hey, I got another question for you about the elections. I can imagine that in Germany they have a pretty robust election system. So there's no controversy over counting votes or not counting votes, that kind of stuff.
It's a really interesting question. So, we don't have the issue of registration to vote. It's automatic here. So you register when you move, and you must register with the government every time. At all times, you have to be registered, and that's how you're eligible to vote. So they just send you your ballot to your address, and there's no am I registered as in which party or there's no doubt about that at all. So that makes it a little easier. It's automatic. You can either vote by mail or in person, and by mail it's a little harder, I think, to falsify these things, because you've got your ID number that's your ID card, and it's impossible to vote. I don't want to say impossible, but it seems like it's a little harder here to vote theoretically more than one time.
Yeah.
So those systems are intact. However, I did read that, again, some of the fringe parties are saying that there's voting fraud going on with the mail votes, even though, like in the U.S., depending on where you sit, there doesn't seem to be evidence. Right. I mean, I read the findings in Arizona, right, that was kind of organized by Republicans, and they didn't seem to find any evidence of wide-scale votes. So from some of the corners, not from the mainstream, from the corners, there's chirping about voting irregularities, but the way the system is set up, it seems like there's much less controversy.
Yeah. And is the voting run, is there one system for the whole nation, and the country of Germany runs the voting system? Or is it like in this country where sort of each state has its own rules and regulations and times people vote, et cetera?
So we have decentralized voting, but I believe the processes are much more consistent than the U.S. So we don't have 50 states. We have, now I forget, I'm going to get in trouble because I don't remember, is it 14 or 17? And I need to know this, at some point. But we have fewer, and they tend to coordinate better than in the U.S. My understanding is that each state controls its own voting, and each region, it's kind of like in the U.S. You have a precinct, and there's a city, and all that stuff. So it's localized, but from my understanding, there's not as much variation from one part of Germany to the other, like I know there is in the U.S., in terms of what the ballots look like and the machines that they use and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, that's interesting. Not much going on here. The weather's getting cooler. I will say that. The leaves are starting to change. I think this morning when I got up, it was 52 degrees, and like 2 days ago, it was 45.
Oof.
So yeah, it's cool. But the days warm up really nice. Hey, here's an interesting one. So a week and a half ago, we headed out to Rhode Island on a Wednesday because we were going to help my son on his house. As you know, my son bought an old house, and they're kind of renovating it. So we're going to spend some time working on the house and some time sailing. So we drove out on Wednesday, and Thursday morning, Elaine wakes up, and she's got a tickle in her throat, and she's congested. I think if we were at home, we wouldn't have thought anything about it. We just would wait a day or two, see what happens. But since my son and his wife have a new baby, right? There's a 3-month-old baby, and we were going over their house, and the baby is not vaccinated, of course. We're super sensitive about those things. So we figured, okay, let's go get a COVID test. And lo and behold, it was really easy. We first we tried the pharmacy. So we got on a couple of pharmacy websites and looked for pharmacies that were, within a reasonable drive. And we just struck out there. It was like we couldn't figure out, we couldn't even navigate the websites hardly at all to get a site. You had to call an 800 number. I mean, it was just really complicated. And then we got on the Rhode Island, the state site. We found places where they do testing, and there was a place like 3 miles away. We got online. We made an appointment. So we were doing this like at 8:30 in the morning. We got the first appointment we could get was like at noon. We got a noon appointment. It was a drive-through facility, and when you had to register and fill out this form, and it said that if you had been exposed to somebody, they would give you just a rapid test. But if you had symptoms, they'd give you a rapid test and the PCR test, because the PCR test takes up to 24 hours. So, okay, great. So we both filled out the forms because I figured, if she's got it, I got it. And we went there and got the two nasal swabs, the rapid one and then the PCR one. Like in 45 minutes, we had the results of the the rapid test. Came back negative, and then like that night at like 10 o'clock at night, we got the results of the PCR test. And man, was it a smooth system and fast and efficient. We drove up, we were in line, 2 cars ahead of us. We were there for no more than 10 minutes and we were done. It was just remarkable. And I got to say, that was the state of Rhode Island. And I got to say, both the things that the state of New York did in getting our shots, when we got our shots back in March now, and this experience with getting tested, man, they were well run, well executed, just really did a great job.
Yeah, that's neat. It's to me, that's the way government should work, right?
Yes.
And where public-private partnerships should work. And it just seems like politics gets in the way of some of this stuff.
Yeah. It was really good. I was impressed. It'll be interesting to see now that they just approved booster shots for people here in the United States, and for certain age groups, and I'm in that age group, over 65. And it'll be interesting to see, now that we have a new governor and a new administration here in New York, because our former governor resigned, how efficient the booster shot process will be. So anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah, and will they use the same system or a different system? Will be interesting.
Right. So that was a little bit of a COVID scare we had, but all is good.
All's well that ends well, huh?
Yeah. So we went out to the boat, and on Thursday afternoon, after we got the rapid test results, we went over to my son's house and helped him do some renovation work on the house. So that went all good. We actually, previous visit, installed 6 new windows in the house. And this time we sort of trimmed them on the outside, and now we're getting ready to do some siding. We're actually going back out to the boat, and to him, Thursday of this week, going to do some siding. But on this previous trip, my 2 nieces came out to the boat as well. So they're sisters, and one of them was on the boat with her mom a couple of weeks ago, and so the other one wanted to come out as well. And one of them lives in Boston. Goes to school there, and the other niece lives near us in upstate New York. So the 2 nieces came out, and Elaine and I, and on Saturday, we went out for a sail. It was quite windless that day, so we motored for the most part. We had a very nice time, and we motored down to Bristol, Rhode Island, which is a nice little town, a nice little harbor and bay down there. And that was really cool. And really a lot of boats anchored out there, big mooring field with all sorts of wide diversity of boats, mostly sailboats, I will say, probably 80% sailboats. But we saw some really high-performance sailboats that you could tell, just sitting on the water, they looked like they were fast. And then we saw these other boats that, looked like they were made in the 1800s and double mast and, usual or unusual sailing combinations and stuff. And then when we were in there, this superyacht pulls into the harbor and drops anchor. And I mean superyacht, I mean superyacht. It was 100, 70 feet or something like that, and was really big. And the name on the side of it said Blue Moon. So one of my nieces, of course, gets her phone out and starts searching. And sure enough, Blue Moon is they had a website, and they had some YouTube videos about Blue Moon. And I'm going to just type it in here because I'm forgetting a few of the facts. It was 198 feet, Mike.
Wow.
198 feet. And it had a garwood. There's like 3 or 4 really famous brands of wooden speedboats in the United States. One is Chris Craft. Probably most people heard of Chris Craft. There's Garwood, and there's Hacker, and I think there's maybe one other one. And these big super yachts, they can't get very close to shore, so all of them have like these tenders, they call them, these other little motorboats that they ferry people back and forth to shore with. And this one actually had 2 of them, and one of them was almost a 40-foot Garwood.
Wow!
Now and they're made out of mahogany, and they actually make them up here in upstate New York. I've actually been through the factory where they make them, and that boat itself, just the tender, the Garwood, is a several $100,000 boat.
Wow.
Yeah. And so this is a 198-foot boat. It was just gorgeous. And they have several YouTube videos about it. One of them is like a tour through the boat because it's for sale, Mike. I know you've been dying to get into the boating world, and this would be perfect for you.
Yeah, at 100x my net worth probably, but yeah.
Maybe
low down payment, monthly payment, maybe $799 a month, with $1,000 down, and but by the year 3014, the whole thing could be mine, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's $50 million, Mike.
Pocket change.
And it said it costs between $5 and $10 million a year to operate
Yeah, I was gonna say the running costs must be unbelievable. Yeah.
the operating cost. Yeah.
And even finding a place to like pump out and get fresh water and things like that must be a challenge with a boat that size. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. So like at the marina I'm at, it can't fit.
There's no way. Yeah.
And actually can't even get in there. Right. So there are marina, like Newport Harbor has lots of space for big super yachts. Now it may be the reason it was up in Bristol. Bristol is 20 miles north of Newport.
Yeah, it's kind of halfway, right, between Newport and Providence or something.
That's right.
If I remember correctly, and it's kind of on the Fall River. It's kind of, isn't it right across from Massachusetts, or close to the Massachusetts side?
It's on the east side, which is the Massachusetts side. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, your geography's good. And the boat show was going on in Newport that weekend, and so the harbor was probably full because the boat show, they take up a lot of dock space with that. And so I imagine maybe they got kicked out of Newport, or they didn't have any space in there, because later in the day another super yacht actually came in and anchored as well. But yeah, it was it's quite the it was quite the sight to see one of those. And when we left Bristol Harbor, we sailed right past it, and it really gives you this idea of scale then, right? Because when you see it when it's 200-300 yards away, you don't really appreciate it. But when you're 30 yards away, or you sail right by it and you go, wow. And you can see, there's a half a dozen people out there polishing this and rubbing this and doing stuff. It was pretty cool.
Unbelievable. I'll have to check out some of those videos. But I suppose it's kind of like the feeling I was walking on the runway once. I got out of a small plane, right? And in Europe, sometimes they let you walk on the runway. I think they do that in the U.S. now too a little bit. But there was an A380, one of the double-decker Airbus planes, kind of right next door. And the scale of that thing was huge when you're right next to it. It looks big from afar, but you look up and it's like, oh my gosh. So I know that feeling from an airplane standpoint, but. Yeah, I'll have to check the videos out. That sounds really cool.
Yeah. So that was Saturday. We saw the super yacht and Googled at it and awed at it, and saw a whole bunch of other boats in Bristol. And we ended up motoring back because again we had no wind. We put up the sails a couple times. The breeze would kick up to 5 to 7 knots, and we'd get excited. We put the sails up, and 10 minutes later the breeze would die, and we took the sails down again.
But do the nieces know how to sail? Can they help, or did you have to teach them?
They have both sailed on Sunfishes before. Sunfish is a little, 10, 12-foot sailboat with one sail on it. We had one of those up at the lake. So they've been out on that, and they've been out on a Hobie Cat. Their mom used to have a Hobie Cat, and they've been out on that a little bit. So they have a little bit of knowledge, but not on a big boat. Mm-hmm. But, they're fast learners, as most young folks are, and you ask them to do something, and they do it. So it was good to have them on the boat. Yeah.
Nice.
And, yeah.
And they want to come back? They didn't.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, they want to come back. For one of them, for the younger one, this was her second time there on the boat. Mm-hmm. So when she heard her sister was coming, she goes, "Ooh, I'm just up in Boston. I think I can take a day and come down." So that worked out good.
Well worth it.
Yeah.
Sailing with Uncle Bela,
That's right.
What's better than having a sailboat of your own? Having an uncle with a sailboat, right?
Yeah. And then the next day, on Sunday, we had a nice breeze that day. What we did there was we actually had 8 people on board. So this was the largest crowd. Yeah. So there was Elaine and I, our 2 nieces, Andy and his wife, and their 3-month-old baby, and they have an au pair because Andy and his wife both work. So the au pair just showed up a few weeks ago, and so she was there as well. So it was a lot of people on board, and I figured out that my new granddaughter, who's now 3 months old, she has been on the boat more than anyone else, except for Elaine and I.
Wow.
So she's had more.
Number 1 guest status.
Yeah, she's been there a couple times just with Andy, and she's been there a couple times just with her mom. And she was actually, if you count, she was there a few times while she was still in vivo prior to being born. So I figured that out. So she's been on the boat more than anyone else. So yeah, she gets extra special status on the boat.
I like it. You should have a frequent sailor club, with a little membership card and some perks, maybe a T-shirt or something.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Premium snacks, like everybody else just gets the peanuts, but she gets the cashews, right? Roasted almonds or something like this, right?
Warm cashews and warm almonds.
Exactly. Everybody else gets Chips Ahoy, but she gets fresh baked cookies, right? I could see a whole program ahead.
Yeah, that might be how they do it on the Superyacht Blue Moon, Mike.
I'm sure it is. All right. I'm sure
that's not
is.
how we.
And
how
your
we
granddaughter deserves the best, Bela.
Yes.
So I like an honorary membership into the Platinum Club.
Yeah, it'll be aspirational on Paradox. Yeah, have to get there. So that was pretty good. And I'll tell you, hey, you know what the best thing about this past trip was?
Yeah.
I had no projects to do on the boat.
Nice. Well, that was going to be my next question. Did you see anything when you had that many people on board that you'd want to change, or did it all work still?
No, it still all worked. It was comfortable. The cockpit is a big, large cockpit, so you can easily sit 6 in the cockpit. And this boat, most sailboats have one steering wheel, and it's sort of in the middle of the cockpit, sort of the aft end, but left to right, it's sort of centered in the cockpit. Newer boats, and a trend that was started a number of years ago, have 2 steering wheels. So they're one on the left side of the boat and one on the right side of the boat, again, towards the aft end of the cockpit. But what that does is it really opens up the cockpit and it makes the cockpit much more spacious. So cockpit easily sits 6 people, and then there's 2 seats way at the stern, sort of on the railing. There's these seats built into the railing. So yeah, it all worked out just fine. I was pleased with that. I will say that I made the same mistake again. It was pretty good wind, and the wind kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and we should have reduced our sail area sooner, because I sort of get into the excitement of sailing, and, with that many people on board, different people have different tolerance for how far the boat leans over.
Oops.
And we should have reduced the sail sooner.
That's heeling, right? Isn't that you taught me that? Heeling, right?
Yes. Yeah. The boat heels, and some people love it, and other people get a little nervous about it. And the way you address that is you can on most boats there are ways of reducing the sail area, so making the sail smaller. We should have done that sooner, and that would have made people more comfortable. And it's actually better for the boat. The boat gets less forces on it. It's, the wind's not blowing and putting as much force on various different things on the boat, on the mast and the sails. And the boat sails easier. But, anyway, I've made that mistake a couple times now, and one of these days I'll get it right.
Yeah, and I think I've been on a boat like this, and, you have to think, okay, the physics of this thing, it's not going to tip over. You know what I mean? It just isn't, but people aren't comfortable with it, right? They're not sure, right?
That's right.
There's really, the keel is so big, right? I guess and what, you reef the sails? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's right, Mike. Yep,
yeah,
you reef the sails.
You told me this too. And you reef the sails, and then it won't lean, right? It won't heel so much.
That's right.
And it stays.
It won't heel as much.
Because there's less force, right, on the sails pushing the boat. So you go slower, but you stay more vertical.
Actually, oftentimes you don't go slower, because the hull of the boat is not designed to be leaned over a long way.
There's more resistance.
That's right. So there's sort of this optimal heel angle, if you will. And as what happens is, as the boat leans over more and more, the resistance goes up, and as the boat leans over, the mast leans over, of course, and the sails spill more and more wind. Mm-hmm. So the wind and the way the wind then goes across the sails is less efficient. So you lose. Right, it feels like you're going faster because you're leaned way over.
You're heeled. Yeah.
Right. But the boat actually often sails faster when the boat's trimmed properly. And if you look at most racing boats, even the America's Cup boats, they don't lean much, right? They, at least not on purpose. They try to keep them, 10, 15 degrees at the most. And again, because the sail efficiency goes down, and the hull through the water efficiency goes down. So yeah,
interesting. So you must be able to develop some sort of simple little device that when the boat hits a certain angle, it alerts your watch, right, or your phone, and says, "Hey, Bela, reef the sails."
Yeah. Well, on my boat, it's 15 knots of wind.
So we should be able to set up a reminder, right? It's artificial intelligence. Come on, right? We've got all.
There's a gauge right in front of me that tells me how hard the wind's blowing.
Okay. Right? You need to put like a red piece of tape. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I just need to, not be so excited. I go, hey, the wind's really blowing. This is fun.
Finally, right? We've had all these days of no air, right? And now.
And like I said, no projects this time. So that was sort of really nice. Most of all the times I've been there, I've been working on something, and I actually just took a little bit of time and waxed the cockpit a little bit. Put a coat of wax on the fiberglass, but there was no maintenance thing to do, no upgrade to do. So that was a nice feeling too. Finally got stuff caught up pretty good on the boat.
Nice, just in time to winterize, right? But that's okay, right?
That's right. That's right. I just scheduled that, as a matter of fact. It's coming out at the end of October. Okay. So, there'll be a little bit of work
about
to
a month left.
Yeah. Yep. There'll be a little bit of work to do to get her ready to pull out of the water. So, that's it for this episode, Mike, I think.
Yeah, you can check Bristol, Rhode Island off your list, right? Been there, done that. Looks nice. Someplace folks can go and check it out. No new projects, which is great. You set a record for the number of people on board Paradox, right? And you've identified your first frequent sailor for your frequent sailor program. We've done all that in it's about less than 30 minutes, Bela. So I think we should call it a day.
Yeah, I think you're right. Let's wrap this one up, Mike.
Yeah, well, listeners, thanks for joining us for yet another episode of now we're calling the Sailing and Cruising the East, right? So I have to get the name right. But we hope you found our conversation interesting and somewhat thought-provoking. And of course, if you have questions about what we've discussed, we always encourage and invite you to get in touch with us. Our email address is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that follow button on your podcasting app. And hey, if you know of someone that would make a good guest for the show, let us know. I'd like to find a guest or two to interview for the show. And, there's a lot of podcasts out there, and there's 30 or 40 sort of famous people in the sailing community that all these podcasts interview. I'd like to find some non-famous people, maybe some interesting characters that our listeners have met or have come across, and reach out to us in an email, let us know, and we'd love to figure out how to contact them and ask them if they'd like to be a guest on the show. And for what's left of the summer, maybe another month, we'll be sailing around Narragansett Bay and Long Island Sound and Buzzards Bay. Hope to see you out on the water. If you see us, say hello. So until next time, signing off from upstate New York. See you soon, Mike.
Sounds great, Bela. I love the idea of getting some lesser known but even more interesting characters on our show, which would be great. So from over here in Münster, Germany, I'll say Auf Wiedersehen and see you next time.